Our readings tonight first come from the 7th chapter of Matthew and then the 4th chapter of James. Do not judge so that you may not be judged. For the judgment you give will be the judgment you get, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, let me take the speck out of your eye, while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck from your neighbor's. Do not speak evil against one another, brothers and sisters. Whoever speaks evil against another or judges another speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver and judge who is able to save and destroy. So who then are you to judge your neighbor? So you've seen it happen. Heck, you've probably felt it yourself. You're at the grocery store and you notice someone in line in front of you with a SNAP benefits card buying name brand items or an expensive cut of meat. Or maybe you see somebody who is obviously down on their luck, but they've got fancy fingernails that probably cost more than you have ever spent on yours. If you volunteer at a food pantry, maybe you've seen somebody walk in wearing clothes that you yourself would never buy because they're just so expensive. And immediately, without even meaning to, the thought starts to creep in. Well, if they can afford that, maybe they're not as bad off as they claim. Maybe they should be spending their money differently. We make these judgments so quickly, don't we? We see a snapshot of someone's life, a single moment, a single choice, and we think we understand the whole picture. We think we know what they should or shouldn't have, what they should or shouldn't do. We appoint ourselves as the arbiter of what's appropriate for someone else's situation, even though we don't know their story. We don't know what they've been through. We don't know what those fancy nails might have meant to their dignity or even how they got them. But we judge anyways. We don't know whether those name brand items were a gift or whether there's 100 other factors we can't see, but we judge anyways. And I want us to look honestly at this tendency that we all share, because Scripture has some very clear and challenging things to say about it. Jesus doesn't mince words in Matthew chapter 7. He says, do not judge so that you may not be judged. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? It's Jesus telling us that our posture towards other people matters to God. When we set ourselves up as judge over somebody else's choices or someone else's life, or someone else's worthiness, we're stepping into a role that isn't ours to fill. And here's what should make you pause. Because Jesus follows that up by saying, the measure you give will be the measure you get. I want you to think about that for just a moment. The harshness, the assumptions, the quick conclusions that we draw about others, that same standard will be applied to us. If we're measuring others with a critical eye, always finding them lacking, always questioning their choices, always assuming the worst, that's what God will see when our own lives get examined. This isn't about whether we can tell right from wrong. It's not about pretending that everything that everybody else is doing is fine and great. It's about our heart. It's about the attitude that we carry towards other people, especially when we think we know better than they do about how they should be living their lives. In these readings, Jesus tells us, it's not your job. It's not your place. Don't try to take that seat. And then James takes it even a step further. He writes, whoever judges another speaks evil against the law and the judges of the law. There is one lawgiver and judge. So who are you to judge your neighbor? That's the question that should stop us in our tracks. Because James is saying, there is one judge, and it ain't you. There is one who has the authority, the wisdom, and the complete knowledge to evaluate a human life, and it ain't you. When we judge others, we're acting as if we have an authority that we simply don't possess. We're taking a seat that belongs to God. We're saying, in effect, I know enough, I see enough, I understand enough to pronounce judgment on another person's life. Newsflash, we don't. We never do. We only ever see a fraction of the picture. We only ever know a fraction of their story. We only understand a fraction of what's really going on in someone's heart, someone's circumstances, someone's struggles. And James asks us pointedly, who are you to judge your neighbor? And the honest answer is, we're not qualified. I'm certainly not qualified. I don't have that right. I don't have that authority. I'm not the judge, and neither are any of you. Our opening prayer was a translation that I made of a portion of Psalm 130. And the psalmist in that psalm cries out, I cry to you, O Lord, hear my calls for mercy. And then comes a sobering line, Yahweh, if you kept track of our wrongdoings, Lord, who could survive? The simple answer, and one that dovetails off of my sermon on Sunday, not any of us. God measured us by what we deserve. If God judged us by the standard of perfect righteousness, if God kept a detailed record of every wrong thought, every selfish action, every moment that we fell short, none of us would survive, not a single one of us. We are all recipients of God's undeserved and absolute mercy, every single one of us, right? We don't earn it. We can't earn it. We stand before God not because we're good enough, but because God is merciful enough. We're forgiven not because we deserve forgiveness, but because God chooses to extend that grace. That's the foundation of our faith, right? And if we're all standing in the same place before God, all equally dependent on mercy that we don't deserve, then what right do we have to judge other people harshly? What right do we have to look at somebody else and say, you don't deserve that, when we ourselves have received everything that we have as an undeserved gift? Like the psalmist, we're all standing in the depths, crying out for mercy, and we have all gotten that mercy. That just levels the playing field. Now, like I said at the beginning of this, we all do it. When I was a teenager, I worked at a food pantry. People would come in every single week and, based off of their individual circumstances, would receive a specific amount of groceries. And we would walk them through a little store that we had built, and they would get whatever they needed depending on their circumstances. Larger families got more stuff. Single people got less. You know, if they were just living just under the poverty line, or if they were really below the poverty line, we had all of these metrics. This would have been in the early 1990s. Now, there was a woman who came in every single week. She never missed. She'd pull up in a 3-year-old Cadillac. It was shiny. It was beautiful. It was the nicest car in the lot. It was nicer than any car that the volunteers drove. Nicer than my parents' car. She'd step out of that car wearing a full-length jet black mink coat. If you know anything about fur coats, black mink is extraordinarily valuable. Every week was the same. Shiny new Cadillac, a coat that probably cost more than my old motorcycle, and she'd get a shopping cart full of groceries. It kind of felt a little bit unfair. I never said anything to her about it, but I did joke about it, and I'm going to put big air quotes around that, one evening with some of the other teenagers who worked there. And of course, I said it right in the earshot of the director and founder of the organization. She was a lovely person, but very severe. She pulled me into her office, and the door closes. "Richard," she said, and it's never a good sign when they use your government name. "That woman is raising 4 children and living in a home for battered women. She's effectively homeless. She was a high-level executive at Kohler, the toilet company. And when she escaped her husband, those were her words, he destroyed her life. She lost her home, she lost her sense of self, and in the process of rescuing her children, lost her job. Over the last 2 years, she has had to sell all her designer clothes, all her incredibly valuable jewelry, and she even sold her, and I am not exaggerating here, 5.5-carat diamond wedding ring. Her abusive ex-husband ruined her friendships, destroyed her reputation, and even turned her parents against her. That car and that coat are artifacts of her former life. They are the only remaining pieces that she has from a shattered existence. They are the 2 tethers she has to her dignity." And then she said this to me: "We don't make judgments on what someone has or looks like here because we often don't know their personal circumstances." Humble pie, delivered from an incredibly compassionate, highly educated, and very tall woman. I learned an incredibly powerful lesson that evening. Now, years later, after putting the pieces back together of her life, that same lady ended up becoming one of the pantry's biggest supporters. She ended up paying her care back multiple times over. And that moment taught me something that, sadly, I still have to relearn from time to time. I don't know what I think I know. I see this tiny slice of somebody's life, and I think I understand the whole thing. I make assumptions based on incomplete information, and a lot of times I'm totally wrong. And I catch myself doing it over and over again. And I have to remind myself that I am not qualified to sit in that judgment seat. I don't have a full picture. I never do. So here's a challenge for you this week. It's not a homework assignment like I've been giving you. It's not a daily checklist like I've been giving you. I'm just going to challenge you to have some awareness, a practice of paying attention. I want you this week to notice when you begin judging somebody. It might be in that grocery store line. You might see somebody buying an expensive steak. That might be the first thing other than 60-40 ground beef and hot dogs that her kids have eaten all year. Maybe that lady with the fancy nails works as a receptionist in a nail salon, and they do them to her for free as part of her work uniform. Maybe that brand new phone that somebody is holding was the last thing they bought before they lost their job. Maybe that $15,000 coat is the last piece of their identity that they desperately are holding on to. When you see how somebody spends what money they have or does something, and you start to think they shouldn't, or if I were them, or they don't deserve, in that moment, I want you to pause. Take a breath and remind yourself that this person just like me, is a recipient of God's mercy. This person, just like me, is standing in the depths, crying out to God. This person, just like me, does not deserve the grace they received, but they receive it anyways, just like I have. We're all standing in the same place before God. None of us gets to claim high ground. None of us has any right to judge. We've all been shown mercy that we don't really deserve. And that changes everything about how we see one another. So I want you to catch yourself in that moment, and I'm going to ask you to choose to leave judgment at the door. When we remember that we are all recipients of an undeserved grace, it transforms how we start seeing other people. That person that's making choices we don't understand, they're standing in front of the same God that we are. That person whose life looks messy from the outside, they're crying out from the same depths that we are. That person that we get tempted to judge, they are receiving the same unearned mercy that we all earned, desperately need. We don't have to carry the burden of judging others because it's not our job. That's not our seat to fill. There's only one judge, and he's the one who looked at all of us in our brokenness and chose mercy instead of condemnation. So let's leave our judgment at the door. Let's focus on our growth, on our own behavior, and on our own need for grace. And let's extend to others the same mercy that we received freely, generously, and without keeping score. Because God doesn't. God offers mercy, and if we have received that mercy, which we have no right to withhold it from anyone else. Amen.